The next thing I want you to to update me a little bit because it's been a while since we talked. So your Russian trip, can you tell me what that trip is about? I think some of my audience may be interested. You were participating in some kind of a communist youth group gatherings or something?
Yeah, well, in 2024 in Russia, they're going to have the World Youth Festival, and it will be March 1st through the 9th. And it is a World Youth Gathering. There'll be 40,000 young people there, 40,000 total. 20,000 are from Russia, and the spots are competitive. It's the highest scores in math, the highest athletes, the highest, the most talented, musicians, the most highest, academic achievers. It's very competitive to get to it. 20,000 youth from Russia, and then 20,000 international guests will attend from many different countries. And there will be 15 people from the United States who will attend, and I'm the leader of the American delegation. This is
What's the name of this gathering?
It's called World Youth Festival.
Okay.
But it's from the tradition of, I don't know if you've ever heard of the World Festival of Youth and Students that was held, the Soviet Union after World War II. They started having every 4 years what they called the World Festival of Youth and Students. And they were global communist youth gatherings that they would have. And every communist government would use it as an opportunity to promote themselves, and there'd be thousands of young youth. And Putin, after the fall of the Soviet Union, they stopped doing them for a while, but then Cuba started it up again in the mid '90s. And then, I went to the one in 2013. It was an amazing experience. It was in Ecuador. And then in 2017, Putin hosted it in Sochi, Russia, because of, the Russian Revolution and the 100-year anniversary. But he made it much more inclusive than just communists. He made it a much more broader, pro-Russian festival. And I went to it in 2017. It was huge. It was at the place where they had the Olympics in Sochi. It was like the Olympic stadium, the Olympic, dormitories and all of that. And the communists did their thing, but it was much broader than that too. It was just kind of friends of Russia from around the world, and everyone who went got a uniform that you wear. They give you a uniform, and they had workshops, and there's thousands and thousands of young people from all over the world, and you learn about Russia and what Russia's trying to achieve. And they formed something called the Future Team, which was like a pro-Russian youth organization for the world that didn't exactly take off, but they formed it in 2017. And I was a delegate in 2017. So now this is separate than the World Festival of Youth and Students, which is the communist one that happens every 4 years. Now this is a new brand they've started called the World Youth Festival, but it's from those traditions. And I will be the chair of the American delegation, and it's going to be very big. I mean, it's going to be very exciting. We're going to have a press conference at the United Nations before we go to make clear that we legally are allowed to participate and to kind of talk about the trip. And it'll be, my organization, the Center for Political Innovation, as well as the Party of Communists USA, which is like a breakaway from the Communist Party, and then something called the American Student Union. All three of our groups will be participating.
Now, why do you need a permission from the United Nations? Or
we expect that with the sanctions, there will be some attempts to prevent us from going.
From the U.S.
Yeah, right? the FBI will probably try to intimidate us from not going. Knock on people's doors and tell them not to go. They'll try to claim that somehow it's a violation of the sanctions or something like that. So we have lawyers prepared, and we're going to legally make the case, in our press conference, that we have the right to participate. So, yeah.
Now, this kind of thing used to be, okay, in China, we need to think twice, where we go in, we need permission, we need that. Not anymore. Right now, China, very easy. You get your passport, you go wherever you want to go. Nobody will check with you. I mean, it's now everything is opposite now, it seems to me. And now, if you go to Russia, yeah, I guess, or Cuba, right? That has always been an issue. Going to Cuba is always an issue, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the legality of travel to Cuba has long been shady, but they have never really prosecuted anyone for just going there because it would go to court then, and they don't want there to be a court ruling. You have the freedom to travel, as an American. But it's the Uhuru case. They have tried to argue that they're acting as Russian agents because they traveled to a conference in Russia. That's the basis for their prosecution. And so in the situation, we want to make legally clear to the international community what we're doing. We also want to promote the festival, let people know about it. So,
yeah.
It's not getting a lot of attention, but I'm sure there'll probably be hundreds of youth from China who are attending. Many of these countries are sending 300, 500, 600, but, America's only sending 15 people. There's 15 spots. So I will be one of the 15, and I'm the spokesperson for the American participants. So
why is so low interest? Is there anybody cap the number, or, I mean, how does it?
It's capped at 15. Yeah. There's, because America and Russia are not on good terms. So yeah, I mean,
so it's the organizer who capped the number.
Yeah. There's so many spots per country that are assigned.
Yeah. See,
and
on this one, I would argue the opposite. I think because there's a tension between the U.S. and these kind of activity would be good. So they should invite more Americans to come. That's how I feel.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Yeah, I mean, you can watch the video on my YouTube channel where I'm speaking at the Russian media, I give the press conference, and it was a really great gathering. The sponsoring organizations, it's the Youth of Russia, as well as the Union of Young Communists of Cuba, the Robert Serra Youth Organization of Venezuela, the Young Pioneers of Morocco. And I guess, in communist countries, I guess, I mean, I don't have to tell you, this, but, it's kind of like the Boy Scouts or the Girl Scouts with the Young Pioneers. Right. I believe in China, that's what the youth group is called, the Young Pioneers, right? And they wear the red scarves around their necks.
Yeah, right? I just call them generally like youth league, something like that. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Those organizations from around the world are sponsoring the festival. So.
Okay. Yeah, that's okay. And the other thing is, CPI had a meeting, right? My understanding, very successful. What's the update there? Can you give us some?
Well, we had our national convention. It was in Portland, Oregon. There was 150 people total that attended. There were 100 people that were there the entire time, but there were a lot of people who just kind of came in briefly. But there was a solid crew of 100 that was there the entire time. We had Scott Ritter as a speaker. We had Garland Nixon as a speaker. We had Jyoti Brar of the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist. She was a speaker. We had Sayed Husseini, who's a very popular Iranian social media personality based in California, but he's, supporting the Iranian government. Lee Stranahan, he came and spoke from Sputnik Radio. David Rovics, who's a popular folk musician, came and performed. It was a great event. It was very successful. We had an opening ceremony where we had, flags, and it was very successful. The group came together. We celebrated our achievements for the year, and we made our plans for the coming year. Speeches, music, it was great all around. And yeah, I mean, I don't know, video.
People can see all that on your website.
Well, the first video is up of the opening ceremony and the opening talk about what we accomplished. That's up. And yeah, Scott Ritter's talk is going to be up pretty soon. And the different videos will be coming out little bit by little bit. They're still being produced. We have our video team because we had many different cameras and different angles and such, but the videos are being posted bit by bit. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The one thing I really want to talk to you about about Sweden. Okay.
Okay.
What is going on there? You see, I actually I lived in Sweden many years, and when I was in Sweden, first of all, there's one thing I'm very surprised when Sweden was applying for the NATO membership, because when I was in Sweden, the Swedish are very proud of their neutrality. In Swedish, they call it neutralitet. So not only the neutrality helped Sweden to avoid war for 200 years, which is very unusual in Europe. And also, many Swedish believe that if every country is doing what Sweden does, like being neutral, then there will be a lot fewer wars. I think they're probably right. I mean, if you just look at the Ukraine war, if not NATO involved, the war probably wouldn't even start, right? If Ukraine knows that this is the war just only fighting between me and Russia, they're not going to get into it. The reason Ukraine willing to do the whole thing is because they think they have the whole NATO behind them. That's my interpretation.
Right.
But anyway, so I'm very surprised when Sweden applied for NATO. We'll see if it's finally get into there, because majority of the Swedish, my understanding, still don't really want to get into NATO. It is the Swedish politicians. So that's one thing. I just want to share that with my audience, I guess. Now, the recent development is interesting is because the union, right? What I find interesting is on the October 25th is where Ford and UAW had a tentative agreement. You probably have been following it. And then 2 days later, Sweden started their strike against the Tesla. I find it's interesting because Elon Musk is the person who always gets his way. More or less, he gets his way in China too, So, but anyway, so in Sweden, this tiny country, the Swedish union started to strike simply because he refused to negotiate with the union, not because any particular condition they disagree. It's simply because he refused to negotiate with union. I think the union's name is called the EF Metall. It's a Swedish mechanics union. And Tesla doesn't have manufacturers in Sweden, but they have service centers. So these mechanics, they just walked out on October 27th. And then they got support from other unions within Sweden. Postal workers refused to deliver like Tesla license. And then I think there are also other unions refused to load up or unload the Tesla parts, stuff like that. And and then Elon Musk got angry, so he filed a lawsuit against the postal service union, saying you cannot refuse to deliver my service, Tesla cars license plate. And then it got even more unions got angry, want to show solidarity. So now the latest I read this morning is spilled over to Denmark, to Norway, to Finland. All the different kinds of unions saying we are going to do something. Okay, we're going to support our brothers in Sweden. And not only that, the different funds, like pension funds, they are now putting pressure on the Tesla board, saying you better get this sorted out. And one of the funds in Denmark, I think is a teachers fund, they already they sold out all their Tesla shares and put Tesla into their blacklist, meaning we're not going to invest in this company. So you see the pressure is mounting, and this lawsuit seems angered even more people in Scandinavia. So it's from one union to multiple unions within Sweden, and then multiple unions within Scandinavia, and now the pension fund, etc. I find that's interesting. Okay, so you're the person who studied the labor movement, studied the socialists and all that kind of thing. Can you explain to me why the labor movement is so powerful, so strong in Scandinavian countries? Now, the US used to have a strong labor movement. What happened?
Well, everything you're describing there would be illegal in the United States. Under the Taft-Hartley law in 1948, in the aftermath of the Second World War, labor unions were very, very strong, and there was the post-war strike wave was going on, and labor unions were associated in the public mind with communism and such. And so they passed a law in the United States called the Taft-Hartley law, which is a very strict anti-labor law that outlaws what's called solidarity strikes. You're only allowed to go on strike about issues in your own workplace, right? What's going on with these other unions that are going on in strike in solidarity with Tesla, that's illegal in the United States. If they did that, they could be jailed. At the very minimum, the employer could sue the union for what they call unfair business practices, and the union would be fined and taken to court. But the Taft-Hartley anti-labor law, it also restricts how workplaces are unionized. It used to be that if 51% of the workers in any given workplace said they wanted union representation, they received union automatically. That used to be how workplaces became unionized. Now, and so it's very difficult. It's very difficult for a workplace to become unionized. It's quite a long process. Every so often there'll be a big victory, like UPS was unionized by the Teamsters in the 1990s, but that was a very difficult, long process. But you don't hear about new companies being unionized very much anymore because it's such a long, difficult process because of the Taft-Hartley anti-labor law that was passed.
Then my question is, how come nobody is filing a lawsuit? Clearly, this to me is unconstitutional because I think the 14th Amendment allow people to free gathering, allow people freedom. And so how come the unions does not fight this all the way to the Supreme Court saying your law is unconstitutional?
Well, I mean, they have fought against the Taft-Hartley law, and there's been a piece of legislation, that Barack Obama said he supported when he was running for president. It was called the Employee Free Choice Act, that would have repealed this. And then even Biden has said he supports. There's a new version of it called the PRO Act, that Biden says he supports. There is a lot of legislation that would overturn the Taft-Hartley law, but the Democrats always say they support it, and then when they get elected, they forget about it. And most of what the labor unions do is they give all their money to the Democratic Party, to use for their election campaigns. At this point, most of the labor unions in the United States, the overwhelming majority of people that are in unions in the USA are government employees. They're federal employees. They work for some bureaucracy of the government or whatever. And there are laws that, like, like federal employees have to be unionized. They have gotten that, as part of the law. So federal employees get union representation, but then they can't strike, right? Because, if there's a strike by federal employees, then things won't happen. So they're not allowed to strike. Now, there was an illegal postal workers strike in the 70s. That was a really big deal. It was a famous, incident that happened. And the military, they had to have the military try to deliver the mail under Nixon. And that was kind of a crisis. And that's how the postal workers won some very big, victories. It's why they have very good, pension plans. And every so often there have been strikes by workers in the public sector. But for the most part, most employees that are unionized are public sector workers. There's certain key industries, steel, auto manufacturing, that still have the strong unions from the 1930s that were built by communists. But it's a very small percentage of the U.S. workforce that is unionized.
In other words, the unions are getting corrupted, right? Because first the law, but then they kind of they just keep on voting Democrats, even though Democrats promise things and don't deliver. They continue to support the Democrats. Why?
Yeah,
why don't they just set up their own party?
Right. Well, there's been many people who called for them to do that for a long time. And there's something like in a lot of states, they have something. In New York State, they have something called the Working Families Party, which is set up by the labor unions. But it's another ballot line for the Democrats. Like they'll have the Democrats' name under Democrat, and they have the Democrat name under New York Working Families. And they do things like that where they will form another party, but it's still just for the Democrats. It's still just a way to, be part of the Democratic Party. But yeah, they have that in New York and other states. They've done similar things. I guess the main thing is that the union bureaucrats are very much, they are under the control of the Democratic Party, and they're so weak, and they have this fear that if the Republicans get in, they'll just be completely outlawed. There's kind of sad things that happen. Like, for example, a lot of unions are very much in favor of casino gambling, because most states have a ban on casino gambling, but a state will want to bring in more money, so they'll legalize casino gambling. So what they'll do is the union will go out and campaign to legalize casino gambling and make a deal that the casinos that open, the employees will be members of the union. So you'll see the unions go out and send all their people to a certain state, and all be getting people to sign petitions and lobbying for the legalization of casino gambling. That's a really common thing that unions do, to try and get casino gambling.
But doesn't that give union bad names? Oh, you only push for gambling. Lots of people don't like gambling, legalize gambling. I'm not sure if I would support that in my state, but
right. Yeah, and the unions, they're very weak. This is kind of how they operate, and the Democratic Party. The other thing, though, that's worth pointing out is that that one of the corrupt influences on the union is intelligence, is the CIA. If you look up Solidarity House, Solidarity Center, this is, that starting in the 1950s, the labor unions in the United States became involved with fighting against communism around the world. And the American government was subsidizing them as a way to get labor union activists around the world to oppose communism. And it's illegal. Also, there was a law passed in 1951, I believe, that no communist can have any elected position in a union. It's called the McCarran Act, the Taft-McCarran Act. So technically it's illegal for any communist to be a leader of a labor union. That's not generally enforced, but I think when you join a union, you usually have to sign that you're not a member of the Communist Party. That's required, but that doesn't mean anything anymore, because the Communist Party is just one of many little tiny groups. And but the labor unions, they go around the world kind of working with labor unions that are aligned with the US government. Like in China, you'll often hear about, these labor unions. The New York Times will do stories about, oh, workers somewhere are on strike. Well, those are CIA unions that are run by I think it's called the Free Trade Union Association, or the International Federation of Free Trade Unions. It's like a CIA run labor federation, but they often hire people from the United Auto Workers or the AFL-CIO to run it. And so the labor unions get kind of a subsidy from American intelligence to run Solidarity Center and to run these kind of nonprofits around the world that fight for workers' rights, but are mainly focused on opposing communists around the world. And so that's been a corrupting influence on them as well. And there's a lot written about that, about the role of how labor unions. It's almost like they've started, the labor union bureaucrats have started to play more of a role internationally than domestically. Like they help the American government go around the world and advocate for workers' rights with their NGOs and human rights organizations. So,
okay, I hope they don't have too much influence in China.
Yeah. Right. And that every worker in China is a member of a union, but the US government doesn't consider those to be real unions. And it does promote these other unions that are just efforts to destabilize China. And the New York Times likes to play that up and say, oh, look, the Chinese government says it's communist, but it doesn't support workers. Well, these fake unions don't represent the workers. And there have been labor struggles in China. Like, there was a big strike at Honda a few years back, but it was led by the official government union. It was workers in that union. Now, there were disagreements, I guess, but labor struggles in China, which are breaking out, tend to be led by the official unions, not by the CIA, free labor unions. So
you see, that's, just to hear you saying that, if I were the Chinese government, I would immediately be very suspicious of all these so-called labor union people coming from the United States, trying to help the Chinese labor. So it's like, you see, that's another reason there's so much control within China, right? That people are complaining, okay, the Chinese government is everywhere. Well, Chinese people has to be everywhere. Because everywhere the CIA and the foreign interferences, they always looking at opportunities to go in, and they will always use very good excuses. Oh, the labor condition is so bad. And then you can see that the mainstream media is working with the US government will, amplify, maybe there's one problems in one manufacturers, and then they will say, oh, look, the horrendous conditions and this and that. Everywhere, China has 1.4 billion people. There's a lot of manufacturers. And if there are some greedy capitalist doing some awful things for the worker, it's very common. All right, it happens, but it doesn't mean the government, turn a blind eye to it. There are channels you can go to complain, etc. And then, of course, there are also media. They do expose these things from time to time. You see that the people who delay the payment, or trying to skip the payment and stuff like that, they got exposed. They do. So if I were the Chinese government, I would say, stay where you are. You don't need to come to my country. We can deal with this ourselves.
Yeah.
So again, I mean, that also explains why there's so much control in China. Yeah, it's very typical.
Yeah.
And then there is a question about, again, going back to Sweden. There is this myth that's saying, oh, if you are all unionized and you're paying labor too well, blah, blah, that will make your product too expensive. And then people will go somewhere else to have manufacture, and then you will lose jobs. When I was there, that simply is not true. I find that what actually in Sweden, the labor unions have a lot of power. The peoples are more equal. So instead of saying the capitalists, they just go somewhere else. Well, actually, there are a lot of reasons other than just payment. That because you also want well-educated labor, right? And the Swedish laborers are well-educated, and that they have also good habit, like a discipline, etc. And then they're generally happier, healthier. That's another thing, right? So I just don't think it's true to say, okay, if you unionize and you're giving your workers too much, then it's too expensive. What's your take on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, the labor union wages tend to cut into the profits of the owner. They don't cut into the price. The price is determined by the market. The product is going to be determined by how much the corporation thinks they can make and have their prices be competitive. It's not going to be based on, oh, well, we have a union, so we have to jack up our prices. That's just That's not how these things tend to work. I mean, if a corporation is going to be competitive on the market, it's going to set prices in line with what the market is dictating, not based on how much they have to pay the workers. Yes, the workers and their wages come out of it, whatever profits are made, and the higher wages are going to mean more production costs for the employer. But generally, the employers are able to sell on the market based on a competitive product. Also, it's pointed out that if you have good union jobs and people are getting wages, then they can sell more products, and that's what the UAW and the UAW, they would always say, make them where you sell them. Because American workers buy cars because they have good paying union jobs. But when
that's what Ford, right? Ford was famous for, that he wants to pay his workers so that they can buy the cars they make. Yeah.
So that's generally the attitude. So Henry Ford was quite reluctant to accept a union, but he was forced to accept a union. It was the Communist Party had a lot to do with unionizing Ford. There's a good book about the struggle to unionize the Ford Motor Company, about Brother Bill McKay, I think is the name of the book. It's Brother Bill McKay. It's the biography of the communist labor leader who unionized Ford Motor Company. And Henry Ford, he was kind of an admirer of Hitler and fascism. He used to give out anti-Semitic pamphlets with every car during the 1930s. I mean, have you read about Ford and his pro-fascist sentiments? And he built Dearborn, Michigan to be kind of his model city. He had like this weird fascist vision of he would regulate his workers' lives to make them more productive and such. It's kind of a history there. But workers should need good wages in order to be able to buy the product. So
these people are very interesting. You see, again, going back to IKEA, going back to Sweden. So IKEA is started in Sweden, and to this day, I find that there is no real competitor to IKEA. Not in the real sense. There are parts of their business they have competitors like appliances and furnitures, but this whole concept of IKEA, I just don't see any real competitors, which is amazing. And this founder, IKEA, I actually saw him when I was in Sweden. The big IKEA store outside Stockholm is very popular. Lots of people going there just because it's a fun place to go. And occasionally you will see him there. There was one time I saw him there. He looked exactly like a carpenter, put a pencil behind his ear and then have some measures here and just walk around talking to people. And my understanding is he's very stingy. He come from Småland, which is famous. In Sweden is famous for people stingy. That's what they're famous for. In other words, he's not that, like cutthroat kind of a capitalist, right? And many of them are like that. And yet when they deal with the workers, they seem like just so vicious and so ruthless in terms of bargaining with the unions. And Elon Musk is one person I thought he would be the person who probably have sympathy to workers. I don't know. So it's a little bit surprising to me that he refused to talk to the union. I guess maybe I shouldn't be surprised because after all, he's still a capitalist, right? But the fact that he even willing to pick up this fight, that's something I find interesting. Even though I doubt he claimed he lives in his factories. He has some on the floor. I don't know, some bed somewhere. He lives there. Because he worked long hours and stuff like that. Seems to me like he's not that obsessed with money, and yet he refused. Seems to me he's very much willing to pick up this fight, even though he's not in a big trouble. So how do you explain that? These people, do they really love money, or this is something of power, something?
Well, I think that Elon Musk in particular, he has kind of the fantasy. He wants to pretend he's one of the great titans of industry, like Andrew Carnegie or John D. Rockefeller or something like that, and that, he thinks he's, when he's sleeping in the factory, that's a reference to Thomas Edison, the great inventor who, and that he kind of wants to cultivate the image that he's some kind of great innovator and such. And part of that is refusing to, not negotiating with the unions, right? I think Walt Disney was famous for fighting with the labor unions, fighting very hard, refusing to negotiate with them. And so I think that that's part of, his fantasy. I see in Elon Musk kind of, it's like he's trying to pretend to be like some of the pioneer industrialists of the past. And so part of that would be hostility toward labor, would be part of that fantasy. I mean, it's so sad, but there's a lot of literature, about Ayn Rand, right, and Atlas Shrugged, and that kind of thing. And that I think that kind of stuff is a big influence on Elon Musk and what he's trying to be. The image, he very much is trying to cultivate an image for himself. He's a media figure, and he wants people to look up to him and see him in a certain way. And I think that has a lot to do with a lot of that literature written about great industrialists and such. And he's trying to be an Atlas Shrugged character. So there you go.
So I guess probably for him, even more important than money and power is his image, right? That
Yes.
he wanted to create this, facade of some kind of a tycoon, but it's modern day, Carnegie or some, maybe, okay. Now that makes more sense. He very much cares about his image. Yes.
Yes, he's the fantasy that many people that go into business look up to. They want to fantasize that someday they'll be Elon Musk.
Oh yeah, very much so. In China, he's very popular in China. He has a lot of admirers, in China. I think he's probably doing a better job even in China regarding his image. People adore him. There are people, his books sell well. And there were people even saying, oh, he really should be the savior of the United States. He would be the president of the United States. And I made a program that's telling them there's not a possibility. He was born in South Africa. There's no possibility he will become the president. And some people actually thinking, oh, if he became the president of the United States, then, the China, US competition, then we get a real competition. There are even people believe that. Yeah. So I think they should report more about what he's doing in Scandinavian to show some true color about this guy. Yeah. And then when he took out, I do say this in terms of Twitter, took over Twitter and bring back some people, but he still continued to censor, right, in Twitter X. He's still censoring people.
Yeah, well, that
like
was
Garland Nixon.
Yeah, I think the Twitter files and all of that. I mean, they never said they stopped. And he said he loves the FBI, and they're still cooperating with the FBI. He revealed what they did before, but at no point in the Twitter files expose is there anything. And so now we will never do this again. And I think it was necessary to reveal that because people saw how blatantly social media was manipulating the elections, was covering up the Hunter Biden laptop story, et cetera. And so it was like they call that a limited hangout where they reveal certain things so that the public can get satisfied and they can know about the bad things the American government does. And I think that what was revealed by the Twitter files, Matt Taibbi, Max Blumenthal, and others, what they revealed is just the tip of the iceberg. I think there's widespread social media manipulation far beyond what was revealed, but they had to reveal that they did it to some extent. They had to let people know what they were up to.
Yeah, so that's also part of his appeal, right? He's making people believe that he's honest and he's transparent. I guess that's what he's trying to do with the Twitter file. That's what my question too. Also, okay, so you reviewed all this. What do you do about it? Does it mean you will stop working, with the government if they ask you to do this and that? They never said that. You're right. Yeah. So. But he's very clever. When he does these kind of things, lots of people believe, oh, now we have a savior, right? We have a real champion for free speech, stuff like that. But he's not, he's a very good comment, I think.
Yeah, well,
con artist.
The art of modern politics, right? Is you get credit for multiple positions at the same time. So please, very different internet constituencies.
Okay. And one more thing about Sweden is that sorry to talk so much about Sweden. It is my personal interest. Okay. The other thing is this myth, okay, if you let the rich people pay too much taxes, then they will move somewhere else. Again, that's not true in Sweden. Sweden has a lot of pop stars and tennis stars, and of course, rich people like IKEA funders, stuff like that. They don't move to somewhere else. They just pay tax in Sweden. Yeah. So it's just simply not true to saying, oh, the rich people will all move away. Some of them will, and those people probably you don't want them to live in your country anyway, right? But the people who have some conscience and have some decency, they won't, because they still live a very good life. It just not as. I think some rich people simply do not want to pay tax. It has nothing to do with their fortune or not or anything. They just simply hate taxes. But in Sweden, a lot of rich people, they pay tax. They live in Sweden, so it's not true.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's cultural, you know. I mean, there is kind of a trend of making cities kind of playgrounds for wealthy people. It's with gentrification and the urban hipster culture. But that's, you know, countries like Sweden aren't going for that, right? There's a cultural attachment there. The people who live in Sweden are loyal to Sweden because they feel a certain attachment.
Yeah. And in Sweden, actually, this class thing is very sensitive. But lots of people they want to believe that they even told me that Sweden is a classless society, which is by itself is a lie. There are class. I mean, Sweden still have royalties, so clearly it's not a classless. But they want to believe that their country, compared with other countries, are much less so, I guess, in terms of the class in the society. Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Well,
hope that's still the
social
case. I mean,
democracy is very, very powerful and influential in Sweden, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, the Sweden, it has been a long time since I lived there, so a lot of things changed. And the latest I heard is that Sweden is not nearly as safe as used to. But that has something to do with the immigration. They didn't do a
Yeah.
very good job to let immigrants to really come into the societies. So the immigrants become separated from the rest of the society, and then lots of young people, then they don't have anything to do, stuff like that, which is a different topic. But anyway, so what is your view of the Argentina's new president, Javier Milei? Do you
I
have
do.
any?
I have a very negative view of him. I mean, and what's disappointing is, you know, I mean, I'm obviously very critical of libertarian economics. I don't think highly of it, but there are a lot of libertarians that like the BRICS because they see the, you know, the dollar and the US financial system as a threat. Well, this guy hates the BRICS. And, you know, I mean, there's a lot of libertarians that are critical of the USA dominating the world. This guy loves the dollar. I mean, everything about this guy is just unappealing to me. You know, the public sector is going out and opposing him, and that I see him as he's just like the new right in a lot of ways. I mean, he's got a crazy haircut and he's got a big personality. What's interesting though is he's a little bit, you know, the libertarian angle is a little bit unique, I guess. It makes him a little bit different, but I just see him as the new right, and that you know, I guess the problem is that in Latin America, we now have a left that is not, you know, solidly revolutionary, right? We have kind of you know, people like Petro and you know, we have a left that is kind of pro-US also. It isn't like the United States is just aligned with the right wing of Latin America, right? It's confusing. It's not like it was during the Cold War, but I see him in a negative light. I haven't seen anything good. It looks like he's just in there to declare war on the public sector, to try and shrink the, you know, the welfare state and any of the social democratic reforms they have in Argentina, roll back the legacy of Peronism. So I don't like it.
I mean, he's only been there in power for, I don't know, a week or something, half a month. But he devaluated the Argentina currency like 100%. So the inflation now shoot up like a 40%, 50%. And so people are already on the street calling for his resignation. I mean, that's interesting, isn't that? Again, the Western elections seems to me like not always working for the people, right? It seems pretty common now that you elect somebody and then shortly after, then this person becomes tremendously unpopular, you know, stuff like that. Seems like this vicious cycle. And then you go to the next round. Oh, we will find another person, you know, we all love that person. And then another round of disappointment. Seems like this vicious cycle just keep on going, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's pushing this crazy junk libertarian economics, and you know, he came in that he would go to war with you know, the Argentine state and the aspects of the state intended to regulate the economy, and that's what he's doing. He's doing exactly what he said he would do, and the public sector is out there to fight him. And you know, we'll see the results. We're already seeing the results. So there you go.
One thing I noticed is the lots of the politicians, in particular if they're elected, they want shortcut. You see, instead of doing some solid work, because to build up a country's economy takes a lot of work and takes time. But people, lots of the elected official, I noticed that they want to see immediate result. They want to see, okay, I'm the one who saved the day. And then they do these kind of extreme things to make things so much worse. That's what I find lots of times. That's what they do.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, that's very unfortunate for the people. But I mean, people get into this vicious cycle, just keep on going.
Yeah, well, the Kirschners are the real left, right? And that they've used lawfare and, the whole corruption angle to push them out of politics. So, I mean, in Argentina, you have the fake left versus this right wing, this crazy libertarian right wing. So, that they've tried to push the genuine anti-imperialist forces out using lawfare. And that's important with the Panama Papers and other things. They try to create this narrative that the genuine anti-imperialists are corrupt. It's very similar to what's being done to Isabel dos Santos right now in Angola, right? She was a very popular leader who was the head of the state-run oil company. Her father was the leader of the anti-imperialist, anti-colonial revolution. And they're, the Angolan government is doing everything they can, freezing her assets, seizing her wealth, doing everything they can to make sure that she's not able to play a role in the economy. Because if she were to run for office, there's a good chance she might win because she's identified with the huge economic growth that Angola experienced in the early part of the 21st century.
So in other words, the fake left, you use a lot of, synthetic left. I would say even the right now is a synthetic. I don't think the traditional classic right should be the way it is. Like in the US, I don't think they're anywhere close to the real right, because the real conservatives should care about the physical conservatives, right? The physical health of the country. They should be very bothered by deficit, for example. Nobody on the right now is bothered by deficit, for example. I actually think it's good to have a balance, that you have the public spending, but then you have the real right to have also control over it, because sometimes public spending could be out of control, right? In Argentina, I think there are some elements to it, but right now there is nobody on the right in the US, for example, to put in to say, okay, this is too much. They're just nobody bothered by the deficit, just keep on printing money and printing money and printing money. So I would say right now there are fake left and fake right. Everybody is serving the deep state and military industry complex, those people globalist. And not only are they doing that in the United States, it seems like they're also trying to push that in other countries as well, to create a fake left and fake right, to make people have the illusion that I have somebody on the left to represent me or have somebody on the right to represent me. But in reality, it's all just a mirage, I think. That's what they're trying to do. Seems like.
Yeah, and that both the fake right and the fake left push philosophical irrationalism, the belief of the individual above all else, the opposition to any form of collectivism. That kind of was what brings, any kind of Americanized brand of politics is going to give you this fear of the people as the mob, this celebration of the individual. That's kind of the basis of any kind of synthetic politics, pushed by the American government, right? The neoconservative right wing and Leo Strauss, the left wing, Susan Sontag and Mary McCarthy and the Congress for Cultural Freedom. That's what they put, is anti-collectivism and fear of the people. And that's what kind of brings the fake politics together.
All right, that's all I have for now. Do you have anything you want to discuss?
No, but like I said, the videos from the conference will be up pretty soon. I think you'll like what you see. You'll probably like what you already saw, and we're moving ahead. We have some exciting projects. February 17th is going to be the Defund the Deep State in Washington, D.C. Rage Against the War Machine 2.
Is that a protest or a conference?
A big anti-war protest happening February 17th, in Washington, D.C. The Center for Political Innovation, we're going to participate. We're actually producing a magazine, a glossy magazine that we're going to have 5,000 copies of to distribute to every participant in the anti-war rally. So that's going to be very exciting. So we're in the process of publishing that. It'll be a magazine themed around what is the deep state, where did it come from, and what our view of it is, that we're going to distribute to everyone who attends. So we're in the process of publishing that. So yeah, it's going to be great. And then we've got the World Youth Festival. And then we're planning in Vermont, in the spring, we're going to have a spring workshop in Vermont with some new classes and a new textbook that I'm publishing. It's kind of level 2 of the classes that we do with the Center for Political Innovation. And then in July, there's going to be a very big anti-NATO mobilization. The NATO summit is going to be in the United States. NATO is coming to Washington, D.C. for a gathering, and there's going to be a lot of protests against NATO in Washington, D.C. in July. And so we're going to be very much a part of that. So
the conference now, the Congress now they're working, or they already passed a law, I guess, to ban U.S. president to leave NATO. This is you didn't pay attention to that. I don't know if Biden already signed it or something. I know they're working on that, and this is entirely because they're afraid that if Trump get elected, that he will leave NATO. So
Yeah,
this
that's
is
what John
entirely
Bolton said, that if Trump is reelected, we will leave NATO. John Bolton said that.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
and yeah, there you go.
Again, John Bolton is one of those fake right. I don't think he has anything to do the right, the conservative at all. He's just warmongering, everything. But
Yeah, well,
anyway,
there's some writing about the manufacturing of American conservatism. What does it mean to be a conservative in America? It basically just means you're a worshiper of capitalism. You
yeah,
believe
I
in the
know,
market.
I know many conservatives feel betrayed by people like John Bolton and those people. A lot of conservatives have nothing. They don't want war. They don't. They want to everything at home, right? To build up the United States and stuff like that. They don't think we need to involve in all these nonsense wars, get our own people killed. It just doesn't make any sense. Lots of conservatives that I know, they're not hungry. They're not happy with the current Republican Party. In particular, the neocons. Many of them are really angry. So
yeah, and I think Vivek Ramaswamy is he's trying to sound kind of like Trump, but he's more controlled. But he's appealing to the fact that most conservatives don't like regular Republican stuff. And a lot of the rhetoric of Vivek Ramaswamy, he wants to convince people he's like Trump. He's not a regular conservative. He has the anti-neocon pledge. He's going after Nikki Haley and stuff. And that there's a lot
he's not a real deal either. He's very anti-China. He's going to start war with China. Don't be surprised that he wants to end all the wars so that we can focus on China. That's what he wants. And he has been spreading fake news about China, like what's going on in Xinjiang. Even the mainstream now stopped talking about it. He's still spreading it. I mean, why does he want to spreading that if he's loving peace, right? He should let people to know the real China and telling people we shouldn't have war with Russia, with China, with anyone, right? But no, he's smearing and lie about China. So he's the fake, another fake. Fake, right? Fake like a peace-loving person. Another one, he's another. If you know how he get his money, how he get rich, he's basically cheated his way to get all the money. Very classic con artist he is, but he's a very good one. He's a very good one. Yeah, I mean, it's worthwhile to check on how he get rich. I mean, very simply, he bought, I think Merck has a drug. I think it's some drug that they no longer find useful. So he spent a couple million something, bought that drug. If it's a good job, they wouldn't sell him for a couple million if there's a huge potential. So it's a fake drug. But anyway, he repackaged it and then went to the FDA and then got the first. I mean, in order for you to pass, there are several stages of FDA approval. So he got the first stage approved, and then he started to talk about this drug, diabetes. I think it's a diabetes drug, and to get his stock price going up. And then when it's height of the stock prices, he sold them. His mother sold it, and his sister. I think all his relatives sold them at the top of and then they failed the second round of the trial. The drug already failed several times, but his mother is a pharmacist, I believe, so they repackaged this drug, and then just to apply FDA approval again. And then once they get the first step, then they started to promote. He's everywhere on the CNBC to promote his company's stocks. And then, of course, they failed the second round, and then it crashed. Everybody lost money, but he sold his money at the height of it. This is the classic con artist. That's who he is. Everybody should know that. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. Doesn't surprise me, but he's trying to get the Trump energy. That's what I've noticed from his rhetoric. He wants people to think he's like a Trump figure.
And Kim Iverson is correct. I think he's trying to get some of the position in the Trump administration as well. So that's what he's running for, maybe even VP or something. So yeah.
Very good.
All right. It's
all
a
right.
good conversation. I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah. You too, and I hope you have a good holiday season.